My name is Jennifer, and I am the eldest of two daughters. For as long as I can remember, I have always been serious and independent. My younger sister Lily was the exact opposite. In our house, as in any other where children grow up, there was always noise and fuss. Lily's laughter, conversations with mom and dad, cheers in response to every news item, all this merged into a single symphony, leaving me, as a rule, aside. I preferred quiet corners where no one could disturb me, a corner by the window with my favorite armchair, books, papers, a pen. That's my world. I could spend hours studying, buried in a notebook, or just reread the pages of books, absorbing their words, which for me were much more alive than any external noise. As we grew up, our differences with Lily became more and more obvious. For example, birthdays, such important and meaningful moments for most children, were not such a significant event for me. It was a time when everyone could express themselves in their bright desires. Lily always tore up her gifts with delighted screams, as if every new gadget or outfit was not just a thing for her, but a true miracle. I always put my gifts aside, smiling discreetly, but not making big demonstrations. The money I received, I carefully put in an envelope, saving for something more substantial than what others offered. My father, who was always proud of my calculations, looked at me with some satisfaction, although I could see that his eyes did not share the delight that he had when Lily received something that corresponded to her stormy nature. "Why do you need this?" he asked when I was saving money for a laptop to study. I replied that the computers in the library were always busy, and for me that was a perfectly reasonable answer. He nodded in agreement, but I could still feel the gap between us. He didn't understand me. He and Lily, with her unbridled energy and love of bright things, were so similar to each other that they seemed like two poles of the same ideology. And in this gap, between my sister's noisy world and the quiet, closed world that I created for myself, I felt separate, as if completely different. Lily, with her passion for fashion and her desire to be the center of attention, couldn't understand me. She literally dissolved into every new dress, every new gadget that came into her hands, and I sat in my quiet corner, sometimes even envying her ability to enjoy it all. She was a whirlwind that changed everything around her, her styles, her demands, her ideas. She demanded attention and understanding, and despite the fact that I was the eldest, she always seemed to know how to win him over. I didn't know how to ask. I didn't like noise and I didn't want all eyes on me. Every day was like a little battle hidden in these different worlds. Lily, dazzling with her laughter and unrestrained energy, and I, absorbed in the world of books and thoughts, our lives intersected, but rarely collided, like two parallel worlds. And even though I was the eldest, I often felt as if I was less understood and accepted. Lily and I were completely different, but at some point, when we started growing up, I realized that despite all the differences, we were still part of one whole, the whole world that our parents had created. I often thought that our house was full of sounds, laughter, conversations, the noise of everyday life. But for me, the most important thing was the quiet rustle of the pages of books, their magic, which allowed me to build my own small worlds, far from reality, but so close and understandable to me. And although Mom and Dad always tried to understand me, sometimes I felt that I remained a mystery that they could not solve, despite all their love and care. All this made me think about how often we try to live up to other people's standards and expectations. Lily, with her bright desires, and I, with my quiet dreams, were two different paths, but both led to the same thing, the search for myself. And although our paths were different, I began to realize that there is no right way, there is no one right way to be. Mom, Dad, I'm on full speed. These words, uttered with such confidence, echoed through the house, which seemed to have been in disarray until recently, mixing with the aromas of morning coffee and conversations. Mom looked up from where she was carefully helping Lily with her makeup. Their eyes met, and in that look there was everything: care, tenderness, slight anxiety, the inevitable interest that parents show in their children, especially at such moments. Oh, that's sweet, dear Lily. Hold on, she said, gently guiding her daughter's hand while trying to apply eyeliner. Lily smiled back, her eyes sparkling with delight that she felt beautiful and important at this moment, and I couldn't help but notice it. This was her comfort zone, her world, in which there was always a place for lightness and brightness. Dad, sitting at the table with a newspaper in his hands, did not really notice what was happening. He just nodded, saying a restrained, "Good job, Jennifer," without looking up from his papers. His voice was even, but devoid of the warmth and concern that seemed to accompany his words. It was such a characteristic moment. His lukewarm recognition of my success did not surprise me. Every year I got used to the fact that everything I do is taken for granted. My aspiration, my efforts, my independence have always remained in the shadows, between the lines. And here I was again standing in this world, where all my achievements, despite their importance to me, remained invisible to those who were closest to me. I silently retreated to my room, clutching the letter to my chest. It was my salvation, my chance for something more. At that moment, the letter that came from the university became for me not just a notification, it was my ticket to another world, a world where I could be truly appreciated. I picked it up, examining its wrapper with a sense of awe and pride. I didn't expect recognition, I didn't expect gratitude, but I knew that this moment was mine, that I had earned the right to take this step myself. While Lily was struggling to graduate from high school, I managed to achieve what I had long desired. She brought home her report card, filled with those very mediocre grades that seemed like I could explode with anger and disappointment. But instead of hearing the long-awaited, "You should try harder," from her parents, they rallied around her, as always, as if she were their only center of the world. "Oh, honey, don't worry about it," Mom said, stroking Lily's hair. "College is not for everyone. You're talented in many other things." I heard her words, but they didn't penetrate me. They seemed so empty, so meaningless. And, as always, there was no condemnation in these words, no desire to teach, only humility and agreement that Lily would not be the one who would fight for her dream. Dad nodded in agreement and added, "You will find your way, princess." These words had no weight for me. The princess? Lily was a princess, of course, in their eyes, and her path was always so straight and simple. I couldn't understand how they could take her future so lightly without seeing all the emptiness behind it. On the contrary, I couldn't even imagine a life where you can't strive for something more, where you can stay within the usual comfort without feeling anxiety or ambition. I could have cried with bitterness, with resentment for all those years when I was not noticed, but instead I just silently got up, took my laptop and went to my room. I wasn't the one complaining about my fate. I made a choice, I made it a long time ago, and I realized that only I had to make my way. It may be a thorny path, but I know it's mine. I threw myself into my work like an obsessive woman. The days merged with the nights, the weekends became just another opportunity to move forward. My life seemed to be nothing more than a chain of commitments and achievements, each step of which was aimed at one goal: to become the best, to earn recognition. I didn't seek wealth or fame, but it was important for me to prove to myself and the world that I could. My dedication paid off. I got another promotion, then the next one, and now I'm at the top. Before I realized this, I was the head of the department, the youngest in the history of the company. Mr. Thompson, the owner, called me into his office one day. It was the moment I expected, but it turned out to be much more significant than I could have imagined. "Jennifer," he said as I entered, "your work has been exceptional. We have never had a case of someone climbing the corporate ladder so quickly." I felt pride fill me, my shoulders straightened, and I couldn't hide my smile, which at that moment seemed a little more than just a response to a compliment. "Thank you, sir," I replied, even though my insides were full. "I like what I do." He smiled back, his face softened, and I saw approval in his eyes. It was not just a recognition of my work, it was the moment when I realized that I had invested all these forces in myself for a reason. It shows, he said, and that's why I want to offer you something. We have a program for our best employees. The opportunity to buy an apartment with a significant discount. You more than deserve it. The words he uttered stunned me. I didn't expect such an offer. Buy an apartment? It was not just a bonus, but a real step forward that allowed me to completely change my life. But at the same time, it was a sign that I had really reached a level that I could only dream of before. I took it not as a favor, but as a well-deserved reward for years of work and dedication. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of paperwork and planning. Conflicting feelings raged inside me. I was happy that I had achieved this goal, but at the same time I felt a strange emptiness. The apartment, the discount, the recognition, all this seemed to fill a space that had previously been occupied by something else. I realized that I was missing something more. Looking at my life from a new height sharpened these feelings. I worked not only for my career, but also to find my place in this world, to prove to everyone that I can do something more than just be a daughter who never got enough attention. When I finally got the keys, I felt like I was walking through the air. All the heaviness that I carried inside me dissipated, and instead I felt light, as if there were no obligations on my shoulders. That was my moment. The moment I deserve. I decided to throw a housewarming party to celebrate my success among the most important people. I haven't had many friends yet, but those who have been in my life have become my mainstay. The guest list included work colleagues, several people with whom I shared an office, as well as several old acquaintances whom I had not seen for several years. Each of them was important to me in their own way, and I wanted this party to become not just a celebration, but a symbol of my success, which I had been following for so long. When the guests started coming, I felt somehow special. I couldn't believe that my life, which was once full of doubts and questions, had now taken such a shape. People came, brought gifts, congratulated me, and it was all right. I was proud of myself. In this new apartment, surrounded by the people I had chosen, I felt my strength and independence. The time I had spent striving for this moment now seemed justified to me. But the longer I was at the party, the more I began to realize that the success that I was so proudly pushing forward was part of something more complex, which required not only rewards and recognition, but also a deeper sense of meaning. And in this new environment, I felt that maybe something was missing. I rushed back to work with renewed vigor, absorbed in a goal that seemed to become more real every day. Months flew by, but I didn't notice them. I was so engrossed in my life and new achievements. Every day was dedicated to work, projects, personal goals, and slowly but surely, I turned my apartment into a space that truly felt like home. It was my fortress, a place where I could be myself, where every piece of furniture, every splash of color on the walls was a witness to my hard work and independence. I didn't need to ask anyone for help. I didn't need to wait for approval. I created this world myself. And so one sunny Saturday, when the weather was perfect for changes, I decided to treat myself to something I had been looking at for a long time. Car. Nothing luxurious, just a reliable sedan that would take me from point A to point B, without any unnecessary claims, but with the confidence that it will not let me down. I chose it based on functionality, not on brand or appearance. The moment I got behind the wheel, I felt like a real mistress of my life. When I drove home, boldly confidently turning the steering wheel, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. It was mine. Bought with my own money, from my own efforts, a symbol of my success. I didn't plan on telling my family about it. It was my little, personal triumph, which I would prefer to keep for myself. But news travels fast, and no matter how hard I tried to keep that joy to myself, the phone rang that evening. Lily, of course. I immediately recognized her voice, full of lively interest and undisguised curiosity. "I heard you bought a nice car," she said with a slight reproach, as if it was something she couldn't help but notice. There was something in her voice that I used to perceive as slight bewilderment, a little condemnation, perhaps even envy. Did you really spend money on this? What do you need it for anyway? I felt a kind of anxiety building in my chest. I knew that tone too well. She thought I was doing something unnecessary, as always. But what could I say to her? I heard her voice again, confidently sliding along the line. Well, you're really doing it all so hard. You work, save money. But why? It's so unnecessary. Why do you need all these things, Ratch? You're doing quite well as it is. I froze for a second. Her words seemed to stop in the air. They were full of care, but at the same time I felt like she couldn't understand me. Lily has always been like this, fast, striving for instant success, without thinking about what lies behind it. It all seemed excessive to her. But I wasn't like that. I was building my life step by step, and at that moment every element of my world was important to me, whether it was an apartment, a car, or just the feeling that I was moving forward. Lily, I said, trying to keep my voice calm, this is important to me. It's important that I know that I can do this on my own. I deserve it. She was silent for a moment, and I felt the tone of her voice change. She wasn't ready to fully understand it, but maybe, at least for a while, she agreed that it was my choice. We talked for a few more minutes about nothing, but I knew that this conversation was important to me. I couldn't change the way Lily perceived the world, but I was willing to be true to myself, even if it meant going against her expectations. When the conversation ended, I put down my phone and looked back at my car parked outside the house. It was another symbol of my efforts, another step towards creating my own reality. When I was driving home in my modest car to my modest apartment, I couldn't get rid of the thoughts that were bothering me. I worked so hard that I didn't have time for anything else. But at that moment, on an empty road, in the middle of the evening silence, I couldn't help but wonder, did I make the right choice? Did I evaluate everything correctly? Was it worth striving for these achievements, even at the cost of personal sacrifice and loneliness? Was Lily right when she always preferred a path full of vivid emotions, relationships, and carelessness? If I had chosen a more difficult path, as she says, would I have been truly happy? These thoughts tormented me, but I realized that I couldn't afford to take too long to sort them out. I thought about my work, my achievements, and the sense of pride I felt every time I achieved something on my own. It was my victory, my personal reward for all the years of hard work. And so, despite my doubts, I made a decision. My path may have been more difficult than others, but it was mine. And it was crucial for me. After all, what I had was created only by my hands, and nothing could compare to it. After Lily got married, her life smoothly moved into a new stage, a life full of changes and new work, adaptation to the rhythm of family life. I continued on my way, looking to the future, despite all those moments when I just wanted to stop and turn back. But all this was a difficult and alien process to me, as I was always attracted by my own independence. Meanwhile, my mother's calls were becoming more frequent and less welcome interruptions. I tried to pay attention to her conversations, but they kept repeating themselves, becoming a painful ritual. Every time I heard her voice on the other end of the line, she would start her story with a fake sweetness in her voice that always seemed a little sly to me. "Jennifer, darling, you won't believe what Lily is up to." I was gathering all my strength to listen to the story of her new life again. And, as always, a series of her successes followed, then one, then another fabulous story. She was invited to the most exclusive meeting, can you believe it? Mom was saying, and her voice was filled with an enthusiastic tone with which she perceived everything that concerned Lily. These stories were like an endless stream in which there was no end or meaning for me. But they kept coming back, and they kept repeating themselves, and I began to feel an increasingly painful feeling of how Lily and I were becoming more and more strangers to each other, despite the family ties. I always stayed on the sidelines, in my thoughts, trying to find a balance between what was important to me and what I would like to experience. But in Lily's world, everything was arranged differently. She could be a part of this whole bright, stormy life, while I chose a quiet but reliable path. Mom didn't understand this. How could she understand? After all, for her, Lily was the embodiment of that very dream of lightness, happiness, and carelessness that she loved and supported so much. And although I tried to have her dialogues with her over and over again, inside I increasingly felt a gap that could not be filled with simple words. I glanced at my trusty but unremarkable sedan parked next to my house. There was nothing luxurious about his simplicity, but for me it was important. He was my symbol of achievement, my little victory. I was so proud that I was able to purchase it on my own. At that moment, I heard the familiar voice of Lily, who was standing next to me and watching my thoughts. She looked at my car with a light, malicious laugh and said, "Oh, Jennifer, you always settle for less. You will always work for others as long as I live a good life." Her words pierced me. I couldn't help but notice how easily she compares our path, without even trying to figure out at what cost it all comes to me. She always believed that happiness is about things, external well-being and convenience, while I used to appreciate the process of achievement itself. She and I have always been different, and despite this, our lives went parallel, but at some moments it seemed that our paths were so different that they could not cross. 2 years flew by in a flurry of spreadsheet meetings, promotions, and meetings where every day was like the previous one. I was climbing the corporate ladder, earning the respect of colleagues and management, and Lily still seemed happy with her life, moving from one shopping trip to another, choosing outfits and throwing parties. Her world was bright, but, as it seemed to me, superficial. Imperceptible pauses appeared in our communication more and more often. We lost a common language, although we could not admit it. But I've come to terms with it, or at least I thought I had. I thought it was a normal state for us, two completely different people. However, one day, on the most mundane Tuesday, my world tilted on its axis. The phone rang, and even though I was getting ready to get back to business, Mom's voice on the other side of the line changed everything. "Jennifer," her voice was unusually shaky, "this is Lily. She returned home. Robert left her. He said she was too shallow, too focused on material things and unable to give him what he needed." My heart sank. I didn't expect this. Lily, always confident in her outer shell, her world, which had seemed so safely grounded in glossy shops and parties, was now crumbling. I couldn't believe these words right away, but something in my mother's voice told me that it was true. Lily seemed to have always lived outside of time, without worries, always confident in herself and her right to pleasure, but now this world, built on unreliable foundations, was falling. I didn't know how to feel. On the one hand, I wasn't ready to see my sister in this position. On the other hand, there could not help but be a feeling that I hardly dared to admit. It was a feeling of relief. I wasn't happy about her trouble, but maybe at some point I identified her image too much with those values that I didn't share. Lily was a symbol of everything I was afraid to become, and now her ideal world was crumbling, as if it were a sandbox built on quicksand. I grabbed my purse and left without looking back. When I entered my apartment, I felt like I was closing the door behind me, leaving behind all the noisy conversations, attempts at explanations and reproaches. My sanctuary. A place where I could stop for a second and just be myself. The silence inside the apartment was familiar and soothing. But at the same time, a strange mixture of emotions was raging in my soul. I felt sad that I was rejected, that my efforts and fatigue were misunderstood and even condemned. Anger at my family, their blindness, their inability to see my virtues, while they continued to idealize Lily, not noticing her flaws. But, strangely enough, I also felt relieved. For the first time, I clearly saw how toxic my family was, how our relationship had slowly degraded over the years, consuming me. The dynamics of our family were so shattered that I couldn't help but wonder how long I'd been trying to keep those connections going, despite everything. In life, it happens that she throws balls when you least expect them, when, It would seem everything has already been decided, and you begin to get used to your position. Just a few days after this scandal, which I went through with my family, news came that left me speechless and, unexpectedly, made me feel alive and significant. I won the company's competition. This chance, like a fleeting light in a dark room, lit up my life and put everything in its place. The prize is a 4-month trip around the world. The cruise, no matter how it sounds, was a moment of weakness for me, or perhaps a hope for a new beginning. I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw the notification. It was incredible. I immediately felt that I had to share this news with my family, hoping that at least at some point they would be able to be proud of me. With trembling hands, I dialed my parents' number, deciding that maybe the good news would help bridge the gap between us, strengthen the bond that, as it seemed to me, had not disappeared yet. "Mom, Dad, you won't believe it, I won the competition. I want to travel around the world," I said excitedly, as if expecting everything to change now. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. The whole world seemed to freeze. I waited for at least some response to follow, but instead the audio pause seemed endless. And finally, I heard my mother's voice. He was cold, like an echo of something I could never fully understand. "How can you be so selfish, Jennifer?" Her words hit me in the chest like a heavy stone. "Your sister is going through terrible times, and you're bragging about it?" It was as if her words were not just an accusation, but a series of hard punches that pierced right through me. I tried to digest them, but inside everything was boiling with pain and disappointment. Why? Why couldn't I be proud of my achievements? Why was every step I took always perceived as an attempt to show that I was better than everyone else? Why couldn't you see how much this success costs me? The panic was growing. I grabbed the phone and dialed my parents' number, as if 1,000 thoughts were spinning in my head. Mom answered first. Her voice was painfully sweet, as always when she wanted to hide something unpleasant. "Jennifer, dear, how was your trip? Where's my car?" Her words sounded almost normal, as if nothing was happening. I froze, not knowing what to say. This strange, almost indifferent intonation alerted me. I listened in silence as the sounds on the phone seemed to slip away, creating a void between us. Pause. Then Dad's voice came on the line, his stern and confident tone that always made me feel guilty even when I wasn't doing anything. "We sold her," he said, and there was no regret in his voice. The world seemed to tilt, and I felt the ground give way under my feet. All these months of work, all these efforts that I put in to become independent, to start living for myself, and like that, without warning, they destroyed everything. I was stunned. I couldn't even believe what I was hearing. "What?" That's all I could say, unable to put my thoughts into one clear phrase. "We sold the car," Dad repeated, as if it was the most natural decision in the world. Mom, not without a certain amount of complacency in her voice, began to explain, as if it were something completely ordinary, the way she explained things to me that I did not understand. "It was necessary, Jennifer," she said with such calm confidence, as if she was trying to convince me that they had done the right thing. "We used the money to take Lily shopping and to the spa. She's so tired, you know. You're always fine, but Lily isn't. She needed to cheer herself up." I stood with my phone clutched in my hand, feeling anger and impotence squeeze my chest more and more. I couldn't believe this was happening. My car was my first independent purchase, something that I was so proud of. It was just a missing part of my life, lost at some point when I allowed my family to dispose of my things again. They decided that they knew better what I needed. "I can't believe I'm hearing this," I said through clenched teeth. "It was my car. You don't have rights to her right now, Dad. You just took her away without asking." There was silence in response. Then there came a moment when Dad's voice became harsh, cold, even angry. "We're a family, Jennifer. What's yours is ours." His words sounded like a sentence. Don't be so selfish. You've never appreciated what you have. You've always thought only of yourself. You just don't understand how to take care of your family." Something clicked inside me, not just irritation, but a whole storm that spilled out. For years, I've been holding back disappointment and resentment, but now all these feelings have come out with incredible force. Selfish? I could barely contain my anger, and my voice was probably louder than I wanted it to be. You stole my car, invaded my house. Am I supposed to be selfish? I want my money back now. And all this was without my knowledge, without asking. It's not your life, it's mine. The response was immediate and harsh. On the other end of the line, I heard my mother take a sharp breath, and then her words, which seemed to cut me off from everything. "You're heartless. You are ungrateful. You're a disappointment to us. We've done everything for you, and you don't appreciate us. What do you even know about us?" Those words pierced me like a knife. I felt a wave of pain and disappointment wash over me. But there was more to it than just resentment. I felt like something was breaking inside of me, as if a part of my life that I cared so much about was being destroyed right before my eyes. I tried to find the words to say something in response, but my head was in chaos. "I do not know how to continue," I said, feeling my emotions fade into the shadows, giving way to emptiness. "Maybe it will really be easier for you without me." I stood in silence, not believing what I had just heard. All that I was trying to achieve, all my efforts, for them it was just necessary. It wasn't some kind of caring gesture, it wasn't an attempt to help me, it was just a decision they made for me, as always. Everything that I once thought was mine no longer existed. Mom kept saying something, but I couldn't listen to her. It was too much of a blow to be taken as just another misunderstanding. My hands were shaking, and I felt the edge of this betrayal pierce me from the inside. "Don't you understand?" Dad's voice was stern. He didn't seem to notice what a mess was going on inside me right now. "We're a family, Jennifer. Yours is ours. Do you want to be selfish?" Selfish. I always thought that selfishness is when you only care about yourself. But now that I had to defend my rights, to protect what was mine, I was told that it was selfishness. I listened to them, and against the background of their accusations, I heard only one thing: they never saw me as a person who has the right to his own space, to his own decisions. "I want my car back," I finally said, my voice sharp and confident, almost cold. "I want my money back. It's all mine. And you have no right to decide for me." Pause. I could hear Mom and Dad looking at each other on the other end of the line, perhaps not even understanding why their behavior affected me so much. "You're heartless," Dad said. "Ungrateful. You've disappointed us." I felt the word disappointment slowly, with a sharp, painful feeling, penetrate my chest. But there was no room for fear inside me. There was only an empty space, which I gradually filled with what was really important. "I didn't disappoint you," I replied, and it wasn't just a statement, it was an act of liberation. "I'm disappointed in you. The way you see me. That you don't believe in me. And that you think you can take away from me everything that I have created." They were silent for a long time. I didn't expect them to say anything. I already knew that this conversation wasn't going to lead to anything good. But something inside me clicked, like a lock that suddenly opened. The time for forgiveness has not yet come. I turned around, feeling this weight, accumulated over the years, finally starting to settle. "Dad, Mom, I need to digest all this now." I did not allow myself to cry, although the pain was incredible. But I couldn't afford to be weak. Goodbye. I hung up the phone and stood in an empty apartment, looking back at my life. The car was no longer important. All these things that I was trying to accumulate also lost their meaning. I understood that the real path was not something that was imposed on me. My path was ahead, and it began with getting rid of their expectations. I had learned to be strong in solitude, and now I needed to learn to be strong in freedom. I sat down at my desk, picked up my laptop, and started planning my trip. Ahead of me was not a cruise or gifts, but an opportunity to discover a world I did not know, and myself in this world. It was my time, and I was going to use it.